We are in Joshua chapter 7 in class this morning. Joshua chapter 7. We've just studied the victory at Jericho, and it's a big high point in this book. A lot has gone well, but now we're going to get a huge jolt in the narrative. Immediately after this victory at Jericho, Chapter 7 and verse 1 says, "But the people of Israel broke faith in regard to the devoted things, for Achan the son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of the devoted things, and the anger of the Lord burned against the people of Israel." And that kind of gives you whiplash, because the last chapter went so well. It's the high point of victory. And that verse is... it's going to loom over the rest of this chapter, because chapter 7 is a dark one where a lot goes wrong. Joshua sends spies out to scout Ai. He's following the same pattern they followed so far, sending spies to take a look at Jericho. But Ai is a lot smaller than Jericho, with a lot fewer people. And so the spies return very confident. They say, it's not worth it to send everybody to this city. It's small, there aren't that many people. We can defeat them easily. We are not 100% sure where the city of Ai was. As far as archaeological sites, it's a little bit contested. But based on the descriptions here, they're going to need to trek like 13 miles and gain 3,000 feet in elevation as they're doing so. So they're going up into the hills, and it's just kind of a pain to get over there. Why send everybody? Just send a few. You know, a war, but it's the time to be a little bit lazy, right? It's not laziness exactly, though. They're feeling very confident. They've just defeated Jericho. They've done very well, and Ai is going to be so much easier. So it's physically difficult to get to, but they anticipate no problems in the battle. So the spies' recommendation is send 2,000 or 3,000 people, and let's just take this place out. So Joshua sends 3,000, and they go up against the city, and they immediately lose. They're forced to flee because the men of Ai are overpowering them. 36 people die quickly, and the men of Ai turn the tables on them, chasing them far away. It's the exact opposite of everything that happened in Jericho, and the exact opposite of what they expected. This causes despair in the hearts of the Israelites. The same language that was used for the Canaanites before, in that their hearts melted, they had no courage left within them. That same language is now used for the Israelites, again showing the complete reversal. So with all that being said, question number 1, what is the reason for the failure at Ai? That'll be from verse 1 and also from verses 10 through 12. Dave.
Well, I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but they were told in chapter 6 not to take the accursed things. I suspect, well, it does say that they did that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if those things were probably idols, gold, or whatever. But that could be one really, really strong reason why.
Yes, absolutely. And that is exactly the reason why, that they were told don't take any of these things, and Achan did so. Ida?
It doesn't necessarily say, but I kind of think hubris might have played a part, because if they had petitioned God, maybe they would have found out about this thing that
Yeah, and that's kind of an interesting take on this chapter, and one that I find interesting as well, that with Jericho, God is directly giving them the instructions for what to do, which city to take, how to take it. With Ai, they just kind of go off and pick it and do it without consulting God. And I don't know, commentators get kind of split on whether that is being foolhardy and arrogant, or whether that's seizing the day and being excited to move on to the next thing. But it is kind of hard to get around that contrast, like you're saying, Ida. You wonder if God would have said, you have something to fix within your camp before you can move on to your next battle, your next city. But as far as we're told, they don't ever ask, and so they don't seem to get any of this information. The theme of hubris plays well into this too, because the whole point of how they defeated Jericho was that God gave them the victory. Their military strategy is a terrible military strategy. That's not how you take cities. You march the Ark of the Covenant around it each day. That doesn't do anything unless it's God who is going to give you the victory. And God causes the walls to fall down, then the people are able to go in and finish the job. So the lesson for them is God gives you the victory, so you better do exactly what God says. Well, turns out somebody didn't think that was very important. Somebody didn't take, or did take what they were told not to take. So he apparently had some hubris in thinking that those rules did not apply to him. Maybe he thought that the people had more to do with the victory than they really did. Whatever the reasoning is, it doesn't matter. He disobeyed God, and so it brings this curse upon the whole camp. So what specifically did Achan do? We're dancing around it a little bit.
He took a beautiful robe, he took silver, he took gold, and he hid them in his tent.
Yes.
And obviously his family knew about this, but I wondered if somebody else didn't see him too. I think that would be hard to hide all that stuff.
You would think it would be. Yeah.
Doesn't tell us. but-
No, it doesn't tell us. There's kind of a lot of silver and gold involved here, and it does seem like it would be hard to hide all of that without anybody noticing. It does seem especially difficult to hide it from your family who's living in the same tent as you, considering he's bringing it into the tent, digging a hole underneath, and then putting it in there and covering up the hole. It does seem fairly improbable that his family's not going to notice that and not see what's going on. But even still, what he has done, as you're saying, he's taken this beautiful robe or cloak, and the fact that it's listed with this shows that it must be very valuable. And then it says 200 shekels of silver, that's approximately 5 pounds of silver, and a 50 shekel bar of gold, which is about 20 ounces of gold. That's pretty significant. That's a pretty large amount of silver and gold for a person, for a family. That's them being well on their way to amassing a good fortune. They're going to have lots of other battles to come, and so Achan will have plenty of opportunity to get more. But he's gotten some when nobody else has been able to. So Achan did this, and now everyone has been cursed as a result. Remember that the reason why this is a problem, because later on we're going to see that they are taking the spoils from various cities. It's not that it was inherently wrong for them to do. In this case, it was inherently wrong for them to do, because God told them, do not take any of these things that are devoted to destruction. And that's that theme we're seeing in Jericho, that the land of Canaan, the people of Canaan, and oftentimes the possessions that they had were harem. They were devoted to destruction because of their great sin. And in this particular case, with this being the first city that they're coming up against, you've got a bit of this principle of God getting the first fruits, that all of the gold and silver and things that they're going to get from this place, they're going to go into the treasury of the Lord, and everything else is going to be destroyed. They were able to successfully defeat Jericho, even with Achan doing this. But the battle against Ai, of course, goes so much worse. Yes, Kathy.
I thought it was really interesting that Joshua had taken on the responsibility of what happened. Instead of going to God to ask him what to do, he laid on his face, and God said, "Why are you laying there? Get up,
Yeah.
do something. Don't, you know." So, I mean, we do that too. When something bad happens, we can take that responsibility on ourselves
Yeah.
and not do something about it.
Yeah, well, and kind of to Ida's point, like, he had taken on the responsibility of choosing which city was going to come next and sending the 3,000 men over there, and now 36 of them have died. There's a lot weighing on his shoulders here, and they've had such an abrupt reversal from what happened in Jericho that he's not totally sure what to make of this. We'll talk some more about his prayer here in a moment. Dave?
Well, I'm looking at it a little bit broader than that,
Mhm.
broader scope than that. I don't think it was just Achan, because if you read the verse, it says the children of Israel committed a trespass. It wasn't, that'd be like blaming, one guy, like Adam for sin for everybody. So I'm suspicious that there was a portion of their release, I don't know, but it sounds like it, that they committed a trespass.
Yeah.
It says that, and including Achan. So if that's the case, they completely embraced the demonic idol, whatever you want to call them, that's what they were, and that's what really upset God. And it wasn't because they plundered, because he told them to, he just told them to stop, don't take that stuff. Now, but the word they in there is obviously plural. I don't know what your take is on that, but I'm thinking
Yeah.
that that's more than just.
So my take on that is probably two things. One, like was mentioned before, we kind of wonder if, did others see what Achan was doing? Is there the attitude among some of maybe this isn't that big of a deal? But on the other hand, when everything is exposed, only Achan is revealed as one who did this. And if others did take of these things, why are they not getting the same punishment that Achan did? I think what we have here is this example of how the sin of one person can create consequences that affect the entire congregation. The people of Israel broke faith and had their covenant relationship with God in jeopardy because of Achan's sin here, and God expects them to remain pure as they're going forward into the camp. I think if we had like a sizable portion of people taking plunder, that there would have been more than a punishment than just against Achan and his family there. Yeah.
Wasn't it the curse of the nation?
Right, and
That's
that,
pretty good punishment.
sure, it is.
Punishment.
Yeah, but even still, like consequences of sin do overflow to other people sometimes, even people who might be innocent in that. So, I mean, your example with Adam there is actually kind of good in the sense that Adam is the one who sinned, Eve is the one who sinned, but consequences of that sin overflowed to the rest of humanity, not in sin being imputed on us, but on death entering the world, on the sin gaining a foothold in this world. We're dealing with the consequences of that because of what somebody else did. And of course, later we become guilty ourselves, but that's kind of the point here, that the people of Israel need to maintain purity throughout the whole camp if they want God to still be on their side, or if they still want to be on God's side, kind of as we learned from last week. So, Mark?
Yeah, I agree. This is totally an instruction on consequences. And just to kind of expand on what Kathy was saying, it is on Joshua for not inquiring of God. And that brings a message not only to leaders within churches or any kind of leadership within a home or anything. And this is the bigger message, I think, for everybody. If you're not inquiring about God, about whatever you're gonna do next, how are you gonna know if it's a right thing, if it's a righteous thing, that sort of thing? And that is, you know, I feel for Joshua, like you said, the hubris, they've done this before where they're trying to please God, so they go fight somebody and God says, I'm not even with you, you haven't even talked to me, what are you doing? And this is an issue of humans, not just Joshua, it's all of us.
Well, you know, early on here in their invasion into Canaan, there's so many of these repeated lessons of you are on God's side, not that God is a weapon you get to pull out and use against your enemies. And again, that's the way that the people around them viewed their gods. Their gods were basically weapons they could call upon to give them divine aid in their battles. This is not Israel's battle. This is God's battle. This is God's holy war against these people who are displeasing to him, and Israel needs to get in line. That was the whole lesson of Joshua meeting the commander of the armies of the Lord. Are you for us or against us? And he says, no. And we talked about what a weird answer that is. I'm not for you or against you. I'm the commander of the armies of the Lord. It's your job to determine if you are with me. That is a lesson they've got to learn here. Just like they were being taught in the wilderness to rely on God, they're being taught in these early stages of invasion that they need to continue to rely on God. He might not be giving them manna anymore because now they're able to eat from the produce of the land, but he is still giving them the victory, and they won't be able to destroy even the smallest city and the smallest army if they are working against God. And so that's the point with Achan's sin here. So let's talk some more about Joshua's prayer, because this gets interesting. In verses 6 through 9, Joshua tore his clothes, fell to the earth on his face before the ark of the Lord until the evening, he and the elders of Israel, and they put dust on their heads. And Joshua said, Alas, O Lord God, why have you brought this people over the Jordan at all, to give us into the hands of the Amorites, to destroy us? Would that we had been content to dwell beyond the Jordan. O Lord, what can I say when Israel has turned their backs before their enemies? For the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land will hear of it, and will surround us and cut off our name from the earth. And what will you do for your great name? That is a bold prayer, and a very interesting one for Joshua to make. So question number 2, explain that prayer. What is he expressing to God, and what is the basis of his request? Aaron.
Well, it's clear that Joshua does not know why they've lost this battle, right? And you think about the contrast between Jericho and Ai, this large fortified city, and this, small town. Mm-hmm. And I just send up a few thousand men. It's not a big deal. And to lose, so Joshua is he's confused and concerned, about what's happened. So like Mark said, on Joshua for not going to God first. It's pretty clear what the pattern would have been, to go to God. God would have said, Israel has sinned. You need to deal with the sin first. Like you were saying, that God is not the weapon. Israel is the weapon. Mm-hmm. And God is not going to wield that weapon with sin, right, in its midst. And he can't.
Right. Absolutely. So Joshua, I think this prayer is indicative of the fact that he doesn't know what has happened. This prayer wouldn't make a lot of sense if he knew the sin that was among the camp. But he's not totally getting this yet, and there's maybe still some strain of hubris in here that God is not cooperating with what they need to be doing. Mark?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Basically, he thought everything was cool. Mm-hmm. All right, we won, and we're just going to go forth and do this other thing. And he's kind of saying, all right, God, what are you doing? He's really, like you said, this is a bold prayer. Like I say, this is what a lot of us, all of us do at some point in our lives where we start thinking, yeah, I've got God on my side, and we just start doing things. And even though God may not want us to do that, I think as you get older, this is what we see over and again with the characters we see in the Bible, like with Moses and Abraham. They start with one faith in God, and he grows and becomes
Right.
stronger.
Yeah. So, depending on exactly how you want to look at Joshua, on whether this is, hubris run wild or some ignorance and a little naivete, I think there probably is some truth to that hubris angle in here, that he's not quite getting it. On one hand, it's good that he is concerned about the name of the Lord. That is good. But, I don't know, this is kind of an interesting prayer and exactly how he's going about saying that. Ida?
I was just gonna say that, getting back to what Kathy drew out, is that now he's just sitting there going, well, if I wasn't right, then what do we do?
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me of the servant that hid his
Hid his talent, yeah. Mhm.
Because he knew that the master was a strict master.
Yeah.
And to me, that shows how Joshua was doing.
Yeah, absolutely. He knows that God is strict. He knows that God, is protecting His great name. But at the same time, he's kind of saying here, like, why do we cross the Jordan at all if you're just going to have us be destroyed on this side? We got some land on the other side of the Jordan. We could have split that up among the 12 tribes and let us enjoy that land. It was good land. It's good enough land that 2.5 tribes wanted it for their own. Why couldn't we have just stayed there if you were going to lead us across here to be destroyed? It's a deeply concerning thing for Joshua. His leadership is at stake. The morale of the people has plummeted. If they can't even defeat AI, then certainly they're going to be overwhelmed at any moment by these various kings and armies that will just, collapse on them and crush them. He's led an entire people to their deaths, is what Joshua is seeing flashing through his mind, because for some reason God's just given up on them, and nobody can seem to know why. That's the prayer. Anything else about the prayer? Catherine?
I think this is just my thought, it's my opinion. I thought that Joshua was angry, very angry at himself. Because in chapter 6, God was very specific about what Joshua was to do with the people, to get the walls to fall down. And now, I think Joshua was angry at himself because he knew within himself that he did not ask God. I mean, it doesn't say that, but looking at the whole story, that's kind of what I get from it.
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of conflicting emotions for him here, and he is turning to God. I mean, it's worth something that Joshua isn't saying, we've lost, everyone get back across the Jordan, we're getting out of here and going to this land that we've already captured. His response is good in the sense that he's falling on his face before the Lord, he and the elders of the people. His prayer is, somewhat off base, partially due to ignorance and partially due to him not quite understanding exactly what God is requiring of them. But that's going to be sorted out soon. Yes?
Joshua's concern now is that the Canaanites would now judge them and their God as being invincible.
Yeah. Right. That, somehow you guys beat Jericho, don't know what happened with those guys, but you couldn't beat AI. Your God can't be that great. You can't be that great. Our gods can overcome your God. Again, that's the way they looked at things. And so Joshua is concerned that the name of God is going to be dragged through the mud, just as the name of the Israelites will be dragged through the mud. That is a concern. He wants God's name to be glorified, and he's almost poking at God a little bit here of, defend your name. And God's response is probably not going to be exactly what Joshua expects. Gary.
I find it interesting too when Joshua says to God, what can I say?
Yeah.
He feels the responsibility of who he is, how it was supposed to go in his mind. And now to lead this people and to lead after this situation, what am I supposed to say?
Yeah. Yes. What am I supposed to say to you? What am I supposed to say to them? What, where do we go from here? But, again, like disturbingly absent is anything of, what did we do wrong? Like, forgive us for whatever wrong we have committed against you. He doesn't seem to have come to that realization that this could be because of sin in the camp. I don't know. It's not in this prayer. It's a little bit more accusatory at God than it is at recognizing that there could be sin within the camp, which I think explains God's response when he tells him what is going on.
Well, he didn't know, right?
He didn't know. But again, his first reaction was, God, you haven't followed through with your promise here. We should have just stayed over the Jordan if you were going to lead us here to our deaths. Not, if there's sin in the camp, I don't know about it, reveal it and forgive us of it, please. Like, there was none of that. I don't know, maybe Joshua was just overwhelmed. It's hard to judge exactly what's going through his mind and his heart, because this is a very emotional and disturbing situation for him. Sometimes we can be too harsh on him, maybe, but he doesn't get it yet. He certainly doesn't get it yet. Kathy?
God told Joshua that the people should not take of the accursed things. He warned Joshua about that. And Joshua warned the people. So if something went wrong, it seems to me that Joshua would have realized that something had to go wrong here. So because God had already been with them in victory when the people did the right thing, it seems that he would have recognized something bad had happened.
One would think. He doesn't say it in this prayer here, but yeah, one would think. And maybe he's wondering that, but hasn't said anything yet. We're speculating a little bit because it's hard to know. I'm sure he's overwhelmed with a lot of emotions in this. Okay?
Well, first he said, he worried about the name of Israel being
Right. Yeah.
And then, secondarily, he mentioned God's name. God's name to me should have been first.
Yeah.
And it all kind of reminds me of when Moses was asking God not to destroy Israel and talking about how God's name would be defamed if he did that. So,
Right.
It just struck me as strange that he worried about Israel's name being cut off from them.
Yeah. And see, it's little hints like that that lead me to think that Joshua is a little off base here. He doesn't quite get it. And what he doesn't yet recognize, like there's the ignorance part of it that he doesn't know about the sin in the camp, but then there's also the other part that's hubris or naivete or something along those lines of thinking that like Israel was owed this victory and that everything is assured and that there couldn't possibly be sin within the camp. I don't know exactly what it was, but little hints like that. He's got those things in reverse order. He doesn't even entertain the idea that there could be sin in the camp that caused this victory, caused this defeat. As Kathy said, this probably should have been fairly obvious, even if he didn't know who it was. The possibility, you would think, would enter his mind. Betty.
Well, the thing I got from it the most was the fact I think he was really upset and angry when the soldiers were turning him fleeing. He says that,
Yeah.
oh Lord, I know I can't read it. What shall I say when Israel turns its back before its enemies? And
Yeah.
before that it says that they turned and fled.
Right. Sure.
And he was really angry with them. I don't expect them to go ahead and fight to the death.
Yeah, you're right. It's not helping matters here. Jerry?
I think as far as being a little off base too, that's very common with all people, with leaders. These huge happenings and relationship with God and law and all, to be a little off base for a while. That happens.
Yeah, it does. And again, part of it is not Joshua's fault because he can't be expected to have perfect knowledge of what every person in the camp has done. So it's not as if he already knew that Achan had done this thing. But on the other hand, you know, he doesn't seem to totally get it yet for the reasons we've already explained. Let's get to God's response here. The Lord said to Joshua, "Get up." And I can only imagine that as like a voice booming, "Get up." And that sounds terrifying to me. Get up. Why have you fallen on your face? Israel has sinned. They have transgressed my covenant that I commanded them. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen and lied and put them among their own belongings. Therefore, the people of Israel cannot stand before their enemies. They turn their backs before their enemies because they have become devoted for destruction. I will be with you no more unless you destroy the devoted things from among you. And goes on to describe a little bit more of how they're going to expose this. Okay, so Joshua's told, "Get up. This is not my fault. This is sin within the camp. And the sin needs to be addressed. And you will not have victory until this sin is dealt with among you." And so verse 11 in particular is in the Hebrew like a volley of short sentences all connected with "and." And so like it's obscured a little bit in some of the English translations, but you know, literally it's something like, Israel has sinned, and they transgressed my covenant that I commanded them, and they have taken some of the devoted things, and they have stolen and lied and put them among their own belongings. This is God going down the list at what Israel has done wrong and why he is enraged at them. So this is a serious matter, and it absolutely needs to be dealt with. So what needs to be done, question number 3, before God would continue with Israel? Aaron.
It says, until they destroy the accursed from among them.
Yes, until they destroy the accursed from among them. That is going to include what was taken, but what else has now become accursed because of this sin?
The people.
The people have become accursed. Go ahead, Barry.
Well, this is a great picture of God's wrath.
Yes.
We really need to understand God's wrath because there's a lot of misinformation. God's wrath is against the accursed thing, and we call it sin, right? God has told us that sin can be no part of him because he's completely devoid of sin. He's totally righteous. So if we're going to be with him, we can't be among the accursed thing or the sin. So there's a common concept that God's wrath is upon all of mankind. But with Jesus' sacrifice, God's wrath is appeased. That is totally false. God's wrath is an attribute of his that is eternal. It never changes. Just like his love is eternal, it never changes. God's wrath remains against the accursed thing. God has given a way for us to be removed from the accursed thing through the process of forgiveness,
Yes.
not the payment of debt, not the appeasement of God, but through the process of forgiveness. The idea that God is appeased and forgives at the same time, is they're opposite of each other. Having a debt paid to you and means you cannot forgive it.
Yeah.
Because it's gone.
Mhm.
So, but this is something that comes from Calvinism and some other things that kind of pervade our society, and that's the way people look at things. But it's only through the process of forgiveness that God removes us from sin. And so, and this is just a classic example of that. How did God redeem Israel in this instance? By getting rid of the sin, the accursed thing, by getting rid of the sin among the people.
Absolutely. Very good point there, and showing that, you know, God's wrath, God's love, like they're set towards what they're set. That remains the same. I like that a lot. God is angry with what is impure and unholy and sinful, and it's Israel's choice what side they're going to fall on in this. Same kind of thing with the commander of the armies of the Lord. Like, it's not that God is on your side, it's that you are going to get in line with God and be on his side. Ida?
Maybe I'm jumping ahead, but when there's sin in the camp, it can't be just one person, which we find out the whole family was taken. But I still have a suspicion that if you have the kind of thinking that leads to sin, it's more than just one family. And it was really important for them to go through this object lesson, where they go through the tribes and finally find out who it is, to teach the rest of the people to get this phony baloney thinking about God's commands out of their mind. And I think we have lots of examples of this through the Bible, like the flood. I mean, he could have just had Noah snap his fingers and all the people would have disappeared. But how would that have helped us or others? And the same thing here, he could have just, gotten rid of it, taken it. But no, but they had to have this lesson to destroy this thing.
Yeah, everybody in the camp coming face to face with the recognition of what sin is and the consequences of it upon the camp. You're right, Ida, in that when one person has that thinking that has led to that sort of action, it's almost always the case that there are others who, even if they haven't gone that far yet, might have some similar thinking. And so, again, speculating a little bit, but also, like, we know the nature of people, right? So when they go through Jericho and they're being told, destroy these things and then take the silver and gold and put that into the treasury of the Lord, how many people do you think were wondering, why can't I take this? What is God going to do with it? Or why this is the first city, you don't have any of these riches yet. Why can't we have at least some of it? Why can't we give part of it to God and keep some for ourselves, or any other excuse they want to come up with? And so there may be among some this idea of faithlessness kind of brewing in their minds, even if they didn't go as far as Achan did in actually taking the things for themselves. Some of them, if they felt like they could have gotten away with it, might have done the same thing. And so as this is going to be exposed, they're going to come face to face with the consequences of it and see how Achan's sin, Achan's rejection of God, led to these terrible things coming upon the whole camp. So God says, put the whole camp together, divide everyone up into the tribes, and we'll kind of narrow things down as we go. The guilty tribe will come forward, the guilty clan from that tribe, the guilty family from that clan, all the way down until we get to the person who is responsible. And there's some drama to that, as we're seeing that there's a lot at stake here and everyone wondering who could it be. But at the end, they're told whoever is responsible for this needs to be put to death. So when Achan is exposed, question 4, I think, is really good. Why is Achan's confession not enough for his rescue? Why does he still die for his error, and what can we learn? Because he does confess. He says, this is what I did, this is where you can go find the things. He didn't have to say all that, but he did.
Maybe he could have done it sooner.
Yeah, he absolutely could have done it sooner. There's so many opportunities for him to have come clean. He gave in to his greed, and he never shows any real remorse in this. So when they were done conquering Jericho and the moment had passed, and even after the things were hidden, he could have taken a moment and gone, what have I done? And come clean. When troops were being sent to Ai, he could have thought to himself, I wonder what's going to happen when they go out to fight and we have sin in the camp. Maybe I need to come clean before they leave. What about when 36 of his fellow soldiers died? What about when his fellow soldiers ran in terror for their lives? What about when Joshua and the elders are mourning and lamenting all day until nightfall? What about when Joshua is praying to the Lord and asking God why this has happened? What about when God has announced that someone has sinned? What about when the whole camp of the people is assembled to find out who the sinner is? What about when his tribe is brought forward, his clan is brought forward, his family is brought forward? At any point, Achan could have said, it's me. He doesn't. I wonder if he's holding out hope that maybe somebody else will take the blame or they won't be able to find him out. I don't know. Barry?
Doesn't seem to be, as David was, a man after God's own heart.
No. And even in his confession, where does he say that he regrets it? Where does it say that he is sorry? Where does he ask for forgiveness? He doesn't do any of that. All he does is say, I did it.
Which is a good lesson to us of how hard our hearts can become.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can eventually damage you to the point where you just will not forget.
Yeah. Isn't that the whole story of why the Canaanites are devoted to destruction, right? That they are now so damaged by their sin that they will not seek God. And that's why they're being destroyed. The whole point here is Achan gets destroyed by God because he has become the Canaanites. No, he's not ethnically a Canaanite, but morally, spiritually, now he is. Because he is so hardened and so resistant to God, he's acting just like they were. So, go ahead, Kathy. Yeah, Kathy.
I just wanted to say that. Maybe he's sorry he got caught.
Yeah.
Because we do that too. Sometimes if we sin, I should say when we sin, that we don't say something until we're actually caught in the act of doing it. And that's very serious because that means that maybe he didn't believe God when God said, don't take of the accursed things.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct because he's so hardened here that he never once asks for forgiveness. He never once says that he regrets it or shows any kind of remorse at all. This Achan is a reverse Rahab. You see that? Rahab was a Canaanite who sought Yahweh and is saved from destruction. Achan is an Israelite who rejected God, who hardened himself against God, and so he becomes devoted to destruction. They basically swap places. This is showing this is not an ethnic conflict. This is not just one nation against another. This is God's holy war against what is disturbing and appalling and repugnant to him, that his wrath is set against sin. These Canaanites as a people have so thoroughly rejected him that they are now going to face God's wrath, and Achan has decided to jump right along in with them. Okay?
Even if we confess and repent, there are results sometimes that cannot be reversed.
Well, that's the thing. The 36 soldiers who died, right? They don't come back from the dead. The morale hit to Israel, I'm sure, lingered for some time. Achan and his family, they are stoned and burned with fire and then covered up in this dishonorable pile of stones. This is how the sin is dealt with in the camp. And next week we will start at question 5. We'll look at question 5 quickly on all the people who are affected by the sin, kind of to Kay's point. And then we'll go into chapter 8 about how they get victory at Ai. Thank you, everyone.